All right. All right. Ready, ladies?
Yep.
All right. Um, Hi, welcome to today's episode of Uncomfortable Truth Podcast. I'm your co-host, Lindsay.
I'm Melissa Drummond.
And today we have with us Keana Tucker, the lovely Keana Tucker. Can you?
Oh, I'm sorry.
Oh, sure.
Actually, I don't go by Keana Tucker. I know that's what it says on my
Oh, no worries.
Facebook, but I actually go by Keana Shatteen, my first and
Shatteen.
middle name. I'm sorry. Yeah.
Okay. No, no, no.
Keana
Thank you
Shatteen.
for
Okay.
correcting me. Okay. All right.
Thank you.
I saw it on there, but I was like, okay, no, let me.
Right.
No problem. All right. All right. Welcome to today's episode of Uncomfortable Truths Podcast. I'm your co-host, Lindsay.
I'm Melissa Drummond.
And today we have with us the lovely Keana Shatteen. Thank you so much for joining us. Could you please tell the audience a little bit about yourself?
Yes. Thank you for having me, ladies. I am Keana. I am in Chicago, Illinois, and I am a survivor and thriver of life. I've survived a lot of difficulties. 5 years ago, went through a suicide attempt, and grateful to be here today to share my story.
Okay. Thank
Thank
you.
you for that.
So
Thank
my
you.
first question for you is, when was the first realization that you realized that you needed help, and where did it got you to where you are now?
I think when I hit rock bottom after my attempt and I was hospitalized is when I realized I needed help. And I could not do it on my own. Even though I felt like I was alone, I wasn't. And obviously after the attempt, I was hospitalized, prescribed medication, therapy, etc. But over time, I realized that my healing was deeper than just in the brain. It wasn't just a chemical imbalance, it was deeper, more spiritual heart work is what I ended up having to do in order to heal through those struggles.
Hmm,
Okay, so
amazing.
if you allow me to back up a little bit, can you tell us what led to it? Because a lot of people, they recognize at a certain point they're told, you have depression, or you're suffering from depression or whatever is going on because everyone is different. Anyway, my point is, how did you get to that point? Because a lot happens before you realize and before you hit rock bottom. There's a falling process.
It is. Usually it's like a domino effect. It's like a chain of things. For me specifically, you're right. Depression was something I had battled with for a very long time, probably as early as when my mother died when I was 16. And actually, I was diagnosed in my early 20s before I became a mother, but I was in denial about it. And you hear what I'm saying? I was in denial about it. So I didn't really do anything. But I knew that whenever life would get difficult, or if I was feeling triggered, and for me, my trigger was abandonment and attachment. So during the time of my attempt, I was actually going through my separation from my husband, was my husband, because we're divorced now. But
I
at
love
that
that.
time, that was the most difficult thing that I had ever went through. And it was a culmination of all the previous difficult events, like my mom, my dad's death, plus other traumas, and just not really being able to understand who I was on the inside and really know what my emotions were or why I was feeling what I was feeling is what ultimately led to me hitting my rock bottom.
Hmm.
Melissa.
So, when everything happened, you lost your parents, you went through a divorce, um, did that felt like you were in denial? How long would you say in denial you were when before you started to believe that you did have depression, that you
I
did have
think for me,
issues?
I think I finally realized I had issues. I think I was in my 30s. It was probably around the time I got married. So that would be, yeah, 29, 30 is when it really started to manifest, so much so that it affected the marriage. And that was, again, all of the turmoil, all of the chaos from that and previous things, the guilt, the shame, everything that I felt about myself. All of these old stories is what ultimately led up to me having the attempt.
Mhm.
Okay, now speaking of the denial that you said you were in, so full disclosure, I've suffered from depression before, but for me, it was actually triggered by my birth control. So that was fun. But anyway, that being said, I was being told because I was on it for a period of time. So I was being told like, oh, are you depressed? Or, people were implying things. And I'm just like, no, that's correct. I'm like, no, it's because I'm overweight. No, it's because my job just isn't what I want it to be. No, it's the weather. Like you see it outside.
Right.
So what kind of denial was it? Because I'm like, no, when you're depressed, this happens. And instead for me anyway, it was just, I just didn't care. I wasn't sad. I wasn't angry. I was just
Mm.
existing.
Excellent question. I think when I first got that diagnosis in my early 20s, the therapist basically, as I was describing me laying in the bed all day on the weekends, not doing anything except being in the bed watching TV, and she told me I was depressed. I told her I was not depressed. I was just lazy. But that's the same thing I did in my marriage. And to my husband, it may have seemed like I was being lazy, but to me, it was my coping mechanism for when I became challenged by my emotions. Because again, I didn't even understand what I was feeling, but I knew the feeling so well physically and mentally that that was my way of dealing with it, just lying in bed, just sleeping. That's all I wanted to do is sleep. The attempt, I wanted to sleep and not wake up. So
And at this point, did you have your children or how many? I'm sorry, you mentioned you're having kids, more than one, right?
no,
Just one.
yes.
Okay, okay, all right. So at this point, did you have your child?
So yes, my son, I actually had my son in 2007. So by the time the attempt happened, he was very well here. He was here. He was in the midst of it, not knowing it at the time, but he's aware of it now.
Okay, all right. Ms.
Yeah.
Lopez, sorry, you can ask the next question.
Yeah. So very similar to what you guys go through. I go through a little bit of depression, but I mostly suffer from anxiety. And I went through anxiety. I wasn't officially diagnosed until I was 16 years old when I started seeing my therapist. I no longer see him anymore. But a lot of people, a lot of my friends and my classmates thought I had a mental health issue, and they would try to do like something like, Melissa, I think you may have something wrong with you. I think you need to see, I think they tried to set meetings up, but I was in denial. I said, no, I have a problem. I'm fine. Until I found my coping mechanism. So, how long did it take for you to develop your coping mechanism? Because I didn't find mine until, even though I was diagnosed at 16, I wasn't until I was 12 when I found mine. So, how long did it take you to find your coping mechanisms?
It took me hitting rock bottom. It took me until I became an adult after I finally got the treatment that I needed. It was basically a wake-up call because I kept trying to ignore myself. And that was when I finally learned how to develop healthy coping mechanisms. So once I was released from the hospital, I actually joined a support group, which is really tremendous in helping me with my coping mechanisms, as well as prayer and meditation and other spiritual aspects is what helped me be able to develop healthy coping mechanisms.
And what were you, if you don't mind me asking, what are your mechanisms?
For one, prayer, meditation. I love being outside, being in nature is very, very therapeutic. I reach out. If I am feeling uncomfortable, unlike myself, I now reach out. I no longer isolate because isolation was also normal for me. That was the way that I would just, shut the world out. But no, now I actually reach out. I ask for help and I have affirmations, I have pictures, I have everything around me, visual, spiritual, everything that I need to help me continue because it's always going to be ups and downs. But now I have a plan, so I know how to get ahead of it.
Uh, for me, it's more like squishing something like a little stress ball that calms my anxiety and my depression a little bit.
Nice.
Hmm.
Now, you mentioned that you would shut the world out to an extent. Um, I'm a firm believer that we need alone time and time amongst others. So I guess my question for you is, how do you recognize if that was at a point something that you were doing too much? How do you recognize when you need to do that now, but in a safe way, if you will?
For me, I knew that I was becoming isolated when people would reach out, friends would reach out, I wouldn't comment. Usually I would shut myself off of social media. I would just go into hiding and I lay down. I would just come home, get into bed, and it would happen for multiple days at a time, weeks at a time. That's how I knew that
Okay.
was depression. It felt different, the feeling of it. Now I listen to my body when I need breaks and I shut the world out, but I do things for my mind and body and my soul so that I'm replenishing myself.
Okay. Thank you for sharing that.
Mm. So where did you find the strength to of the pain, obviously the dark part of your life where you tried to take your own life? How did you take that pain and decided you're going to use what you went through to maybe make a difference in someone else's life?
That is a good question. I always knew I wanted to write a book and I wanted to share my story, but the final push came in last year, actually, when I turned 40. I guess you said I had a midlife transformation and I got a call from God saying it's time for you to share your story. It's time for you to put the book out. It's time for you to save lives because I finally realized that we're all here. We all have a purpose. We all have a reason. We all have gifts. And I finally understand what mines are. And I know I'm here to serve and uplift others. And this is the way I'm supposed to do it.
And was writing the book a way of like therapy for you to take to release what you were keeping in for so long in the past?
It was. So the thing about my journey is I always had actual journals. So I always had various events during those times. But when I wrote the book, it was very therapeutic because in a sense I had to grieve my past. So as I was writing it, it was very therapeutic. It was emotional. I was some days I couldn't even finish writing because it was so hard, but it was also very fulfilling because I was able to celebrate my life, celebrate my journey, celebrate my strength in the past. I worked hard to build myself back up because it was not easy. Being in a dark place like that is very hard, but you don't have any other way to go once you hit bottom except to go up. So
Okay, now I'm going to ask you a slightly controversial question. So the Black community, we have gotten better, but we don't really discuss or accept mental illness. So it's you should pray, you haven't prayed enough. Oh, you just need some good food. You know, all the excuses that you can think of,
everything. Yeah.
everything, right? So that being said, what did you experience in I don't want to say coming out, but in a way, being honest
Mhm.
with the world and yourself and your community. Like, this is what I'm going through. And this is why it's not crazy, it's not abnormal. And a lot of us are going through it at the exact same time.
It's been very well received. It was shocking when my family and close friends found out, obviously after my attempt, especially to my family. Like I said, my parents are deceased, but I do have a very large extended family. But they had no idea the severity of depression I was in. Nobody knew because I had a mask on. I mean, I looked like this every day, but internally I was falling apart. So it was shocking. But as I started healing, because I started healing out loud, I started sharing my voice, just sharing things here and there on my socials because it helped me heal. And it was always something in my soul that said I needed to be honest and authentic so I can help somebody else because somebody else is definitely going through what I went through, and somebody else is looking for answers and they don't know where to go, just like I did. So I guess I have to be the change since nobody else is able to find the things that we need. I'll be the ones who create it.
Right. Now, you did mention your socials. Um, how do you feel about people consistently going on social media to express what they're going through when it comes to mental illness? Because I know that can be, a conversation of, you're seeking attention or you need to handle that privately. What would you say to someone who will want to do the same thing and they're getting all this negative backlash?
I would say to the person that feels like healing out loud and sharing on social media, if that makes you feel better and if it helps you get through, your difficulty, then do it. Do whatever you need to do to make sure that you're okay. Your health and well-being matters most. But also, too, when you're doing that, ask yourself, why are you doing that? Because oftentimes the answers to our struggles, they're inside, they're within. So when I share the parts of the story and what I experienced because I'm no longer in it. And I share it as a way, as a resource and as a tool to educate others, not to get attention. And in fact, when I was going through those dark moments, that was when I was not active. Every time I would go through a difficulty, I would shut it down. So now I'm healed. I'm sharing it authentically. I'm sharing the good, the bad, the ugly. And I'm also sharing how you too can help yourself. And it doesn't even have to be mental health. It could be just difficult life struggles, circumstances, grief, job loss. I've been there, I've done it all, but it all feels the same. A loss is a loss. And I'm here to help people heal from their losses.
So do you think the media plays a role in like the way mental health has been portrayed over the years and why there's often a stereotype? Like we've seen that in like I think the major example would maybe in the show 13 Reasons Why and their portrayal of depression specifically in young people. Do you think that's harmful, what the media portrays mental health?
I don't. And actually, I watched 13 Reasons Why. I really enjoyed it. But I think we need to start talking about it, seeing more about it, not to scare anybody, but to bring light to it because we're still afraid to even mention the word suicide. We still have to walk on eggshells because there's this misconception that if you mention the word, you're going to plant the idea in somebody's mind. That's not true because as someone who has been there, the thought is already in their mind. So the best thing that we can do is just ask the question directly. Are you having thoughts of suicide? Are you thinking about unaliving yourself? We have to be direct. We cannot continue to pretend this is not a thing when our youth, our adolescents are still dying by suicide. When are we going to start talking about it openly and authentically?
Mhm.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
I also enjoyed 13 Reasons Why, and
yeah.
something that someone mentioned to me was that they were um, idealizing it. And my response to that was, if someone is like pretty much what you said, if that's someone's thought, then that's their thought. Um, you don't watch a movie or watch a show and see how everything unfolds and why she was in that space and see the result and say, you know what, this is a good idea. And I'm also going to make tapes and do it. Like, that's not how that
Right.
works.
It does
No,
not at all. No.
no.
Oh, sorry, Melissa, were you going to say something?
Yeah. So well, we all seen the show. We all probably saw the first season. What was one part of the show that you felt captured like mental health in a good way, and which part of the show you felt like they could have done a little bit better?
Thinking about the first season.
Yeah, because that's what the book is based off of, and I read the book too.
Right. I know it's been some years.
That's what I was
I,
thinking.
I
Yeah.
yeah, it's been so long, but I think they did. I think it was captured well. I would have to re-watch it today because that was probably 5 years ago that I watched it. So I can't really recall now. I would need to look at it again.
Okay, well, I just wanted to pivot a tiny bit. So you mentioned your husband, which I love that term.
Thank you.
So one would say that, going through that with someone in your corner is helpful. Did you find that to be the case?
And that's the thing, because nobody really talked about it and nobody really understands it. The person that I was with, my husband, wasn't, I don't want to say he wasn't supportive, but it wasn't the response that I needed. And it wasn't his fault. He didn't know what he didn't know, which is why it's so important again to talk about it. Because when someone tells you in their state of mind, I want you to know what to do in order to save them, in order to help them get the help that they need versus making them feel worse. Because I was told I was selfish. And that's the very last thing you want to tell someone in that space. You don't want them to feel worse than how they already feel.
Absolutely. Do you feel, I'm sorry, Melissa, just one more
No,
question.
no, no, you're good.
Okay. Your son, you had your son at that time. I'm not sure how old he was, but I'm assuming he was pretty young. Under the age of
11.
11. Okay, okay.
Mhm.
So that being said, kids notice things, but then sometimes you'd be surprised what they don't notice. So I'm just curious, from your perspective, do you think he realized what was going on with his mom, or just didn't know what it was?
Oh, absolutely. And again, it was very difficult moment because his parents were also separating. So he absolutely knew. And because of the type of person that I am, it's very hard for me to hide my energy and my emotions. So my son absolutely felt everything that I felt because it was hard for me to hide it. It consumed me so much so that I thought that it was best for me not even to be here in order to be his mother. So that goes to tell you how hard it was for me to even be able to mask it. He didn't understand exactly what was going on, but he knew that his mother was going through a lot.
Mhm. And was that easy to explain? Who explained it, if you don't mind me asking, to your son, like why you weren't around, why you're in the hospital? Did he fully understand? Like, did he completely understand, or did this person have to like walk on the eggshells and explain it in a way that an 11-year-old may understand?
No, we told him then that I was away on a business trip, his dad and I, or his dad told him that. And that was it at that time, because again, I wasn't even sure if I couldn't even accept the story and what had happened. So I couldn't even imagine telling my son. I was still stuck in the shame of it and the embarrassment. So I wasn't able to tell him. I just told him about it probably about a year or so ago.
Wow.
Okay.
What was I want to did I want to ask how he responded, but not for you to go into detail about how, because that's personal. But I like to think that this generation is a lot more understanding than previous ones.
Yeah,
So I'm
Yeah.
just
yes, they are.
assuming that he was like, okay, thanks for sharing.
It was so interesting, and it wasn't like it was planned. He and I were out at dinner, and he I believe he was a freshman in high school. He's a junior now. And I guess we were just talking about his friends, and he mentioned one of his friends being really, depressed, going through a lot. And I just asked him, do they talk about suicide awareness? And has he mentioned anything about it? And then it just opened up the door. And I told him that I had an attempt. And it shocked him at first, but he kind of got emotional. But then he was like, wow, I never knew. So now he understands why I have to share my story.
Yeah.
Really quickly, just to piggyback on that question, I have an opinion on this, but I just want to know from your perspective. Um, there are people who are depressed and they don't go to work, they don't do anything. Like you said, they shut themselves out, or shut themselves in. Um, there are also people who are, for lack of a better term, functioning. So, you said you look the exact same way. No one would have ever caught on to
Mhm.
it. So that being said, do you think one is not easier, but one is a little bit, there's benefits to one over the other?
I think it's not, because even if you're functioning, you're still avoiding. You're not even allowing yourself to feel in order to heal. At least once you have addressed and you realize you're in the depression, now you know what it is. So you're feeling it. And that's a matter of, are you tired of feeling it, or are you ready to change the feeling? How worth it? How bad do you want to feel different? Because it's up to us. Only we can do the work. And that's why it's such a holistic experience. The healing process is not just medication and therapy, it's you showing up for you every day, because you matter and you matter. And it means getting up, doing something that you don't want to do, but you have to do it because you have to know that you can do anything you want, and you are worth it. Depression doesn't define you. You can beat that.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful message, by the way.
Yeah, I
Thank
love it.
you.
Melissa, did you have another question?
Yeah. How do you balance sharing your story while protecting your mental health from being re-traumatizing but constantly revisiting those painful memories?
I can never be traumatized from my life. It's basically like my superpower because I'm a survivor. I'm a thriver, actually. So the more I share it, the more I get a chance to celebrate my life. So it doesn't trigger me at all.
I like that.
So can you tell us a little bit more about your book? It's Healing Out Loud, correct? That's the title? Okay,
Yeah.
so it sounds self-explanatory, but I want you to have the moment to explain your book.
Yeah, it's a good question. So it's my story. It's my story about how and what I was feeling at the time. There are some good, bad, ugly parts. I get very vulnerable, very detailed about what caused the emotional distress. You get an understanding of the foundation in which I came from, so that when you understand leading up to the events of the attempt and after that, plus tips on how you can take care of your mental and emotional health, as well as reflection questions and even some meditations in there.
Okay, thank you for explaining that.
Yeah.
So, when writing your book, how did you handle maybe the backlash you may have faced when people like you shouldn't share that information, or you're just doing it for attention? Like, how did you handle that to make sure you're not going to let this affect you and you're going to go back to that bad place?
I haven't had any negative feedback. I just heard one person say, "You're telling all of your business." And to me, I was like, no, it's not all of my business. It's the parts that I know people need to hear so that they can start their healing. But I haven't had anything but positive feedback.
It's great. I like that.
Thank you.
Melissa, did you have another question?
No, you can ask the next one.
Okay. What is one thing that you didn't hear throughout the process, or while you were, from the beginning of your, I guess, yeah, your process to the end of it? What is something you wish you heard from someone?
What did I hear?
Or even if it's something you
Uh,
wish you didn't hear. This will
I
help
wish
people
I didn't
understand.
hear.
Don't say this. Maybe
Oh,
say
I
that.
can tell you what I know I wish I didn't hear is,
Okay.
why are you depressed? What do you have to be depressed about? As pretty as you are.
Yeah, you look younger than yeah, you
All
look
right.
younger for your age. Younger.
Thank you.
I thought you were like
Thank you.
28. I'm sorry.
Oh, thank you, beautiful. Yeah, no, I'm big 40. I'm grateful though, but I'm 40
We're
girl, but
gonna
I
say math
appreciate
teacher all over
it.
again. I had a
And you
math
mentioned,
teacher in high school, and my
Oh
parents
my
thought she was
gosh.
younger, and she was older than they thought. They were shocked that she found out that she had two kids who had graduated high school.
Okay. That's funny.
um, and you mentioned someone called you selfish. So
I
obviously
did.
you
I
don't,
did.
yeah.
That definitely don't want to say that. You don't want to kick anybody while they're down. Never tell anybody if they're thinking about taking their life that they're selfish. Best thing you can ask them is, how can I help you? What do you need from me? And give them positive love and support and resources to help them. That's what else I have in my book, resources on where to go to get help, as well as signs and symptoms, even the subtle signs that you don't notice, like the sleeping all day, laying in the bed, medication, taking it here and there, things like that. There's things to look out for that are like early warning signs that most people don't recognize because they're just not aware.
Um, Now, another thing, we're both millennials. So I like to think that in some ways we think alike. That being said, um, I I'm a generation basher. And but what I mean by that is I look at the younger generation, I say, y'all are so damn soft. And of course, I don't mean as in you can't feel emotions. I am a huge fan of crying, all of it. I don't care if you're a man or a woman, you need to express yourself. But what I mean by soft is, oh, I'm just not feeling it today. I don't think I'm gonna go to work. Um, yeah, I'm just not feeling it. I think I'm just gonna go out to happy hour. Or, but things are hard. And it's just like, yes, life is hard. So how do you and how could someone like me who just feels like certain things are like, grow up? How do you know when to actually recognize the signs of, okay, this isn't someone who's just not realizing that at the age of 18 or 21 shit gets real. This is someone who is actually struggling with depression or anxiety.
Right. And that's a good question. You'll know when it's an issue, when it becomes a problem, when it starts to jeopardize your way of living. If it becomes a continuous pattern of you calling off every day, you're just not yourself, then that's a problem because I used to work in corporate, I worked in human resources. Most companies won't even allow you to take consecutive days off, no more than 3 without a sick note. So usually you would be returning back at that point or going on FMLA. So at some point you can't just stay at home all day and not work. And that's obviously a red flag because you're giving up on yourself, you're giving up on your livelihood. And if you're having anxiety or panic attacks constantly during your normal day, during the normal things that you often do, then those are the things to listen to. It's really about paying attention to your body because the body keeps score. The body tells you that you have to pay attention. You have to know yourself in order to understand the way your body is communicating.
I also, you mentioned working in corporate, and corporate is definitely not helpful or conducive to that. That being said, I think probably being asked by your supervisor, "Hey, is everything okay? Is there anything that I can provide to you?" Because yes, although maybe people do not have work ethic, but like you said, there can be things that can be, what can I do to help? And then maybe at that point you can weed out, you're just not feeling the job, in which case that's nothing I can help you with.
Right. You have to be honest. Again, you do have to be honest with that. But I love that you said that because that's actually why I decided to step out of corporate because when your intuition is just you're just so in tune with your intuition and your heart and you're a loving person, I could see that the employees were burned out, they're stressed, they're overwhelmed. I kept trying to, implement, create new things, resources that we can give the employees, but I was told we didn't have the money. So I decided I will still help people. I just have to do it a different route. But managers, leaders should absolutely check in on their staff. That's what makes you an effective leader.
Yeah.
You have to know your people.
Yeah.
You have to pay attention. It's just like your family. You spend so much time with the people at work, they are your family. I believe that's one responsibility of a leader is to check in on your employees. How are they physically, mentally, and emotionally?
Absolutely. And then you have to care. That's the next step.
Exactly.
Yeah. You have to care.
I'm
So I have a,
grateful. I
mhm.
had a really supportive director. She cared a lot. She allowed me the time off. I actually overextended my FMLA because she knew I needed the time. Even when I came back to work after my attempt, I had to go back out. And she still allowed me the space and the time. I'm so grateful for her to this day because that doesn't happen often.
No, it
Yeah.
doesn't.
I feel like when a boss or a supervisor or anyone tells an employee that they sense something is wrong, they're going something with their life, mental health may not be in the best, if they notice that small details, because maybe they're performing at like a really high level, but they notice that maybe they're drifting off, they can't just tell the employee right away, because I feel like this is a pushing a boundary more. So they may ask a coworker or a friend to see what's going on, and they realize that their mental health's in decline, they're dealing with the death in the family, they're dealing with maybe medical expenses right now. At that moment, they have to sit back and think, okay, maybe even though they don't want to, I'm gonna let this person take a few days off. It's maybe they don't want that because maybe they do need the money, but it's best to have those few days off so that this person could perform at a better level. Now, when they do get the person a few days off, some people might complain about it, but they had to explain. I would rather have this person have 3 days where they can calm their head than 3 days and think this is going to get worse. Because at that moment, that person who's taking those few days off, they realize I did need this. This person he didn't realize something was wrong. They did understand that maybe I needed my help, and they'll understand if I need to take a week's off or maybe I need to take an early vacation. And the employees realize he really does. This person does understand our needs. And yes, it's better to have one employee take some time off so that we can come back stronger than dealing with another major issue.
Yep. I agree.
It shows support on like on all three sides. It shows you have a good environment.
Absolutely.
It shows you have a good
Yep.
support, a good higher up network that understands the employee's needs. And it also shows the employees, hey, you're needed here. If you need
They're
that month off
supported.
because
Right.
you say your parents say something you're dealing with a really difficult time in your life, take that month off to relax and clear your head. Don't take advantage of it because then we're not going to believe you. But you have to like sometimes you need that month off, take that month off.
Keana, do you live in fear that not that your depression will come back because I imagine it's not something that just goes away. Am I correct? Like it's
No,
okay.
life always lives. However, because of course, when I would have those bad days after my attempt, I used to freak out. I thought that it meant I was about to spiral out of control again. I thought it meant I was going to have another attempt. But then I had to learn how to be patient with myself and not judge myself and just have self compassion. So now when I have those days, because I'm so self aware, I just turn in, I meditate, and I journal. I ask myself, where is this coming from? Because you know that ultimately this uneasiness, this chaos is coming internally, it's from inside. So again, it's about being honest, knowing yourself, asking yourself, what is it that you're afraid of in this moment?
One of the best
Mhm.
things that my therapist has ever said to me, and it wasn't even supposed to be profound, but it really stuck with me. And I said, this was a bad week. And she's like, okay, well, why? And I'm like, it just was a bad week.
Right.
And I'm like, something's wrong. And she said, you do know that your emotions change on a regular, right?
Yeah.
And there's nothing wrong
Yeah.
with that. You're sad, then you're not, then you might be
Right.
anxious. And then she actually said, she gave me a paper, but then I found an app where you can just mark down mark down your feelings throughout the day.
Mhm.
And when I start to feel away, I literally remember, hey, I feel a sigh of relief when I say your emotions are supposed to change. You are not supposed to
That's
be
right.
constantly happy. That's crazy. You're not supposed to be constantly sad. There's something wrong with that too. But you know, a happy if you're sad because you have to commute in the snow, that's okay. You know, like
That's
if your
right.
day didn't go the way you wanted to, that's okay. You don't
It's
have to go
okay.
into a panic because your feelings
Yes.
are less than ideal. So
Right.
I'm glad you said that.
Yeah, that you're right. Emotions just are. They're not right or wrong.
Yeah.
They just are. Oftentimes they don't last long, especially crying, because once you get it out,
Doubt.
you feel better.
Right.
It's all energy. It's
You
all
do
the
feel better.
energy release. So
Right. Yeah. So thank you for saying that.
Yeah.
uh,
What's one thing about mental health that you talk about, but you notice isn't being talked about, but you wish it was being more talked about?
I noticed, especially being in the inpatient and outpatient process, they don't talk anything about the emotions and realizing that mental health is really an emotional health. They don't really talk about the holistic parts of it, meaning they talk about the chemical imbalance, they talk about the brain, but they don't talk about the disconnect between the heart and the brain and why the depression or the anxiety or whatever it is even there to begin with. And I had to understand that I needed to figure out what was triggering me. Why do I keep having these moments? That's the part that I had to understand. That's what I mean about the spiritual parts, because I had to start breaking down my stories and looking at my past to understand why do I keep feeling these same feelings and emotions, and why are they making me powerless over myself and over my judgment. And that's the part that they don't really talk about, but they see a bunch of ads for different types of medications, but they don't tell you it all starts within, and it starts with the heart, body, and soul. It's not just the brain.
Yeah. That did make me think about the fact that I sometimes have to recognize that my habits, more specifically, my eating habits and my sleeping habits can have a major effect on
Yes.
my mood. And, you know, I'm not
Yes.
special, that's everyone, right? But some people can go a little bit further than others.
Mhm.
And mine is subtle, right? I'll just be like, you know, it's just, well, you don't just wake up the next day and feel weird. It's like you realize when you feel that, oh my God, for this past
You
week, I've
do.
been eating out. For this past week, I haven't gotten any sleep.
Right.
I've been watching TV till late at
That's
night,
right.
and it starts to
Yeah.
affect your mood. And then again, I had to remember this is not a depression, because it is kind of like PTSD in a sense. You're like, why? I don't want to go back to that feeling.
Yes.
Your mind was hormonal, but you still fear it because none of us are safe from depression, right? You never
No
know.
one.
It's kind of like addiction. You don't know if it's going to be
Exactly.
you until it's you.
That's true.
So
That's
you know,
Yeah.
I'm scared, like, oh my God. And I'm like, oh, girl, ain't nothing wrong with you. Eat a vegetable, drink some water.
right. Take care of your body. And that's the thing. We don't even understand that the body keeps score. So oftentimes the body is signaling us, but we aren't even fully aware of our bodies or what to look out for. So then once it snatches us down, we get to a point where we hit rock bottom. Now we have to be forced to sit down. Now we have to be forced to care for ourselves. And
Yeah.
sometimes it takes that push, that force to make you do the work. You can't outrun yourself.
Yeah. What is it? If you don't sit down, it's going to knock, your body's going to knock you
That part.
down.
It will.
Yeah, that's what happened
Absolutely.
with me when I was a freshman and when I did community college for my first
Mhm.
year. I was a stress eater. I would eat junk food on a daily. Vending machines
Oh,
for my
yeah.
friend. I always went for like junk food. And I knew I needed to lose weight, and my parents knew I needed to lose weight when they saw how much weight I gained, how high the cholesterol was. But it was hard for
Mhm.
me because it was a very stressful time in my life. And it was stressful for a long time. And I was always looking for excuses to eat junk food. Like, oh, you got an A.
Mhm.
Yeah, have a cinnamon roll. I was like
Yeah.
looking for that excuse to deal with my stress. It wasn't until COVID hit that I realized that I no longer had access and I had to find other methods, especially since I was transferring out of that college to go to another university
Mhm.
because I've gotten my credits that I needed for that college. So it's like, okay, so now I'm no longer have access to vending machines anymore because with a mask once we came back
Right.
or during the
Right.
Zoom calls. I was forced to eat home and eat the food that we had. It was fruits and vegetables. There was no junk food. And I realized, wait a
Yeah.
minute, I was just using an excuse. Now I don't have an excuse. So when I came back, when we took the mask off for the regulation, we took the masks off. I was like,
Mhm.
okay, you're not going to eat the junk food, Melissa. You're going to try to stay healthy. Keep in mind, that's not really much of healthy options when it came to college. I mean, there are healthy options, but it's like
Yeah.
sometimes you do break a little bit. So it's like you're going to control it. You're going to eat junk, but exercise. You're going to exercise more. Exercise
Mhm.
30 minutes a day. And plus, I was walking more. I used to take shortcuts a lot back in my old college. Now I've taken it. So it's like I realized there was an issue with my food. Once you address that issue, I feel like you're hit with that roadblock. Like, hey, listen, it's like, Melissa, you have to stop eating the junk food because I have had that issue of being a pre-diabetic at one point in my life. And I realized I'm not going to do that. I'm not going to make myself sick. I have to find another way to cope with my stress. At that point, I began listening to more music. I found that wasn't my best method because in the end of the day, I was an unhealthy mechanism. So I found another method to help me out.
And I can't imagine corporate. Um, Corporate is no joke. Of course, it depends on the career too, but
Mhm.
honestly, corporate has not always been known to
Mhm.
be the work-life balance friendly environment.
Mhm.
You, especially having a child, having a partner, I'm assuming you go to work, you add in the commute time, and then you have
True.
to come home, cook, make sure your kid is
Yes.
asleep, make sure they're
Yes.
good,
Yes.
and
Yeah.
then then find time to sleep. So I imagine,
Right.
on top of what was going on, your environment and your lifestyle wasn't helping. It is not because you were partying.
Absolutely not. You're right. I didn't have time. I'm working. I have a son. I have a husband. I'm trying to take care of this. I'm doing everything except putting me first
Yeah.
Yeah.
and my needs. But most of us are like that. And you're right. Corporate does not care. Some places do, but a lot of places don't. And that was, again, one of the reasons why, because we need to create conscious corporate cultures and take care of our employees holistically. You can't expect them to work 12 plus hours or 8 plus hours or any of that without feeding them. You have to give them something physically, mentally, spiritually. How do we empower them to continue to show up that way? It's not fair.
Yeah.
And on top of that, now I will say this. I am going to say right now, I know that depression knows no race, color, gender. However, I wanted to ask you how you felt experiencing this, especially as a Black woman, and then a Black woman in corporate. Like, how did that how do you feel that that what's the word influenced your experience?
When I had my attempt, it wasn't bad because again, I had a director who was very supportive and understanding. And I actually worked at a hospital in human resources. But before then, I never had that type of support. I remember being at one employer, I actually told my director that I was going through some depression. And I do believe she told another one of my colleagues. So needless to say, I didn't stay in that job long. But very much not taken seriously. Now they're starting to take it a little more serious because corporate, especially big, large companies, they're starting to see that it's costing them more to have employees out of work due to mental and emotional distress than it is actually having employees at work. So they're starting to take it a little more seriously, but again, you still have a lot of employees that are afraid of losing their jobs and fear of needing to take care of their health first.
That's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah,
When it hits their
because
bottom line, then they start to understand certain things. Anyway, what were you saying, Melissa?
no, it's just that before we were mentioning about like having like a work life and you balance, a lot of people don't realize that the life that they've always imagined it's actually one they planned out and realize they have to make a change. If you've ever seen the show How I Met Your Mother, the character Lily, she breaks down to the main character Ted. She's mixed, she's happily married, she's a teacher, she's married, she and her husband had her first child, but she breaks down to Ted, saying there are times she wished she wasn't a mom because she goes to work and there's kids and she's work. She comes back home, she has her son who's a baby, and there's more work, and it's really hard for her. Eventually, at that point, slowly in the series, she realizes that maybe she needs to change career paths because she is an art she went to school to be an art to do art. She did is a teacher, but she's like maybe it's time for a different path because in the end of the day, it was her job making her stressful. And so you think for someone who is going through that, at that point, do they have to find a different career? Maybe like leave that job?
It just depends. They have to be honest. They have to ask themselves, is it work that's the problem or is it home? They have to be honest about where's the distress coming from. Oftentimes it can be the job, but because we are just so conditioned to just keep doing what we have to do to make ends meet and to provide, that we don't even check in with ourselves to even see if this is the reason why, because there have been plenty of times I've been in jobs and it was a job. The one I just mentioned, like I said, I didn't stay there long because it was a very negative, dark environment and I wasn't happy. It just didn't make my situation any better. And I do recall times where I was feeling uneasy in my jobs. And it was because I did want to change, but I didn't understand it. I didn't know what that meant. It just felt like I'm bored. I want something, but I'm used to this, so I'm just going to stay here.
Yeah.
Melissa, did you have another question before I ask her final question?
Yeah. So what is one thing you wish you know now that you knew back then? And do you think it would have made a difference in the journey that you had?
There's that one thing that I wish I knew. Say that again. I'm sorry.
What's one thing you wish you knew back then that you do now? And if you did know it back then, a piece of advice or maybe a method, do you think it would have changed anything?
I do. I think if I had known that I could go to an emergency room to just tell them that I was thinking about taking my life or harming myself, I probably would have did that. I didn't know that you could just walk into an emergency room and say that, and they would make sure that you're safe, keep you under observation because I didn't know that. I didn't know where to go. I just knew I was thinking about taking my life and I needed help, but I didn't know where to get the help. We have so many resources now, so I'm so grateful for that.
Yeah. I think that's one person that people don't understand that there are two types. If you do need help, there is self-voluntary or involuntary. Self being you admit yourself in, which many people don't know you can do,
Mhm.
or you don't. And that's most likely that's when your doctor, or if you're younger, your parents and your doctor realize that you need to go and this is through someone saying this and this is not by your own admission, you have to do this. I actually learned this from watching a video on YouTube about this woman talking about her process with mental health. And she mentions how mental health wasn't treated well back then, because I can't watch like 24 hours, staying 24 hours in asylum challenge without being completely disgusted. Because back then, mental health was not treated. They basically sent anyone in there, anyone who they didn't feel was basically not to the societal norm. So if you had a disability, you have mental health, you were basically going to be put in there, and they did things to you that are considered unethical. So when you do look at those videos, it's like you're not understanding the horrors or understanding things back then. Because even nowadays, mental health is, yes, we made a long way. We still have a long way to go, because changes didn't happen until the moral treatment movement happened, and that's when we did get facilities, we did get doctors, we got help. But there's still a long way we have to go, because if a facility isn't getting the money and resources that it needs, most likely those patients' problems, they may just get worse.
Yeah.
All right, so the final question, although we have asked you a million questions, there may be something that we have missed, right? So I want you to take this time to say something that we didn't ask you that you feel is important, or something you want to tell us about yourself, or the audience about yourself, anything.
That's a great question. Ask me. I didn't. You didn't ask me this, but my book is available now for pre-order. So people can order that. The book is coming out during Suicide Awareness Prevention Month in September. It's coming out on World Suicide Prevention Day, September 10th.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. We'll definitely include the link. I believe you sent that to us. And also a call to action, anything.
Anything. I would say, if you are dealing with anything, if you are feeling unusual, unlike yourself, please reach out for support. Don't wait. Don't try to avoid it. Don't think it will go away. Address it as soon as you feel it.
And finally, how can people reach you? We'll also put this in the video, but I just want you to say it too, because it's your brand, you have to say it.
Yes. For anybody, they can follow me on Instagram and Threads at I am Keana Shatteen. Facebook is Keana Tucker, or my business page, KS Empowerment, as well as TikTok, KS Empowerment. And order the book. I am going to be doing some giveaways, some free one-on-one consultations with coaching to help heal these souls, help save my soulmate, so we can all live a fulfilling, thriving, beautiful life.
Thank you. Thank you so much. All right. So
actually, I have one more thing.
Oh, sure.
So we don't have to, it's like a small game. We don't have to play this one, but it's something, since we've been talking about a lot of heavy subject matters today, maybe we should end a little bit on a happier note. If you don't have to answer this question, you don't want to be, we don't have to do it, but you can be any fictional character, who would it be? You don't have to do it. It's okay. We don't have to. I'm not forcing you.
I don't know. Right. I'm sorry. I have nobody.
Yeah, those always get me too. I'm like, I was gonna say Beyonce, and she's not fictional, so I don't,
I know.
But yeah, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you,
that concludes
ladies.
today's episode of Uncomfortable Truths Podcast. I'm your co-host, Lindsay.
I'm Melissa Drummond.
And we just had an amazing conversation with Keana Shatteen. Go to her socials, buy her book. You said September 10th?
Yes.
Right. Okay, perfect. We'll include all the links. And again, thank you for your time. Your story was valuable. I learned a lot. I know Melissa learned a lot. And I'm sure the audience will feel the exact same way. So thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you, ladies.
Thank you. Have a good day.